Hi, I'm Kara.
And I'm Danny.
And this is Art with a Lisp. I am a certified life coach and owner of Press Play Coaching.
And I have a lisp.
The purpose of this podcast is to celebrate artists, talk about their work, their struggles, and their taboo relationship with money. If you're a creative person who believes you can never make money off your craft, we hope it inspires you to hear the stories of the ones who are doing it.
Do it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. I promise not to yell into my mic. Today we have our guest, Ben Figueroa.
All right. Hi.
Welcome. I feel like we really need to give you a grand intro. You wrote this, right? I'm going to read this. I want to read this. Ben Figueroa is a self-taught writer, actor, poet, visual artist, and stage performer. In 2012, Figueroa was named Poet Laureate of Union City, New Jersey. He's toured with the performance poetry group, the Mayhem Poets, has written and starred in the stage play Sick Love for No Peaking Theater, and has been published in Instigator Zine, Lamplighter Magazine, Jersey City Independent, and the anthology Solo para Locos. Figueroa is a member of the band Just Now Orchestra. I remember that album. Whose debut album, Doug, was released February 2020. He is one of the 2020 Smush Gallery Summer Residency residents and recipient of the 2022 Art House Cares Grant. He's headlined shows at the Howell Festival, Bowery Poetry Club, the William Carlos Williams. You've just done a lot, Ben. Like, I feel like...
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's...
What I want... Okay, this last part is so important. That you recently had an installation at Smush Gallery called Are You There? An immersive poetry installation. What can you tell us about that?
It was a lot of work. It was basically like a chapbook, right? A book of poetry, a body of work that you could walk around inside of and interact with in a bunch of different ways. So there was a hotline, which is still operational for the time being because I got some funding to keep it going. There was like this text service where you text a keyword and you get a poem sent to your phone. Then there were like more tactile pieces in the exhibit. Like there was this film strip viewer, like that you could read a poem through by like manipulating this film strip viewer. There was a video installation that you could watch on an old TV. There were art pieces. So it was just a big endeavor. And it went really well. It was my first time doing like a visual art show, and I chose to do like a huge solo visual art show for my first time out. So it was like I learned a lot because a lot of things went really wrong. Yeah. So it was a lot of like learning on the job and a lot of like calling a bunch of audibles on things because the original ideas weren't going to work.
When you say it went well, what went well about it? Or how did you know it went well?
Because the way I envisioned people would interact with the installation or the pieces turned out to be the way people interacted with the installation and the pieces. Like I had someone create two magic eye puzzles that were hiding poetry.
Yeah, I was not able to get the magic eye going.
Yeah, I don't know.
I do not have magic eyes because I tried really hard.
What's a magic eye puzzle?
You don't remember the magic eye puzzles?
Remember
it
like
was
the Sunday comics?
It was like they featured prominently in the Kevin Smith film Mallrats.
Okay.
It's like jumble and you have to blur your eyes.
Oh,
yeah.
And
the
you stare at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing pops out. So I made two
doesn't.
of those, or it doesn't. So I had two of those made that were hiding pieces of poetry. So you would have to like walk up to the magic eye and like work at it to see the poem. There were not a lot of success stories with the magic eye, right? But that's because people didn't listen to me.
Okay. Tell me what I did wrong.
Okay. So the way, I think it's very specific because I've never been able to see magic eye puzzles, which is why I was like intrigued by this idea.
And I always could. That's the weird thing for me. Okay.
So even when I had the idea, I went and looked up a bunch of magic eye puzzles and tried it, and I couldn't see them. And I was like, oh no, I have to figure out a way to see these because if I can't, then I can't have one made for me, because I won't be able to tell if someone is scamming me, because they could send me anything. And because I can't see it, I don't know if it has the
They're
poem
like, we
in
got
it.
it,
I don't
and
know
it's
if
a
it's
Persian
real.
rug.
Yeah, it's just. So I was like, I have to be able to see it do what it does, or I can't, because I don't know how to make one. So I had to. It's called a stereogram. I had to get an artist who specializes in creating stereograms to make them for me.
Wow.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of work going into this. Yeah.
That's one piece. It's like one part
piece,
of this
yeah.
installation. So I had to teach myself how to do it. And then I looked up different techniques. And so the specific way that worked for me is like I'd look at the center, cross my eyes, and wait, and then let it get very blurry. And then suddenly the picture, the text would pop out, and then I could relax and it would just sit there. That's the thing with like doing an art show, right? So I created these pieces and they were for sale, and both of the Magic Eye puzzles sold.
Oh, nice.
So I don't have them anymore. Like if I ever wanted to do the installation again, I'd have to have them recreated, because I don't have the original images that were in the show.
So what's the difference between an installation and exhibit?
I think an exhibit is like, this is my interpretation. Right? An
Okay.
exhibit, you go into the room and it's like the work is up and there's little labels and you just walk up and
Okay.
you look at them. And the installation is like, there was a sound score that I created that was playing
yes.
the
It's
entire
immersive,
time.
yeah.
There was a scent specific to the installation, which was I brewed pot after pot of Bustelo so that the smell of like fresh brewed coffee was filling the room every time someone
Did you
walked
catch
in.
that? I didn't notice that. Wow. Interesting. I don't know. First, I just need to get this out. When we're talking about exhibit, I just keep thinking of that scene in Pee Wee Herman. He's like, Exhibit A. He goes,
Just cut that in.
We're going to have to cut that in. He's like, Exhibit Q. And he just keeps going on with these random
Well, just
proofs.
do that every time you say exhibit.
know.
It's coming. It's coming at least 3 to 4 more times.
Okay, so yours was very immersive.
Yeah.
And I thought, I mean, the pieces were beautiful. One of the things that you did, like you mentioned, is that you set up a phone number for people to either to call and hear poems, or a number they can text, and then they get like one of 3 poems.
Right.
And so just the other day, I finally did it. I finally did it with the text. And this poem called Cradles came onto my phone, and it broke me. Like, I read this poem, and I was like, who is this person? So I was wondering if you would want to read the poem, because I just think it's such an incredible piece, and I just want to put you in an awkward position, if that's...
Okay, cool.
Okay.
It's not going to work.
They need to call the
You don't
number,
have
right?
to do this.
I
You
don't
can say
know.
no.
I just don't. I don't typically. I don't feel uncomfortable a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
All right, we don't have
But-
to do that.
Yeah.
But
We'll
I'm
post
very. I'd be very comfortable reading this.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
But why is it not going to work?
because you said awkward situation. It's not awkward.
Okay.
I'll
Then
do
that's
it.
not gonna
I
work.
will do it.
All right, let's do it.
Wow, that's a lot more text than I remember. All right. I was a baby once. Tiny limbs not ready for the heavy world and all its pulling toward the dirt. I was porcelain skulled. The whipping machine of my mind new and slick. In my crib, I was resting potential. Loose joints beckoning toward the ceiling. My mother was alive. The worry over her newborn child growling in her teeth. Her hands, 2 cradles worn with work. 9 children having already rocked to pubescence and adulthood in the fingers of her nursery. My father was alive. The workload of a new mouth to feed crawling round his gut. He'd hold still, breathe deep, and the sparrows of his fears would fly out flapping their concerns around the room and out the window. Once emptied of his feathered anxieties, he'd switch on his smile and place the needle of his tongue on a more optimistic song. The feathers and dust settled before the swaying of my mother's rocking chair legs. My father powered up his piston spine and went off to work. I would lay in my mother's arms, the bow of my breath playing soft against the violin of my chest. She'd pray for it to keep playing, her worry now a quiet thunder in the darkness of her mouth.
Whew. Wow. Thank you for reading that.
And I want to say that I wrote that poem while laying beside a pool at the beautiful Sojo Spa on a really nice summer day. So that's like a little glimpse into the way my mind works.
Wow.
Right? Like, this is a nice day. This is what I want to do with my time.
When I read it, I had such a sense of like quiet, like this very small, quiet place. That's what came up for me. And it, there's a lot of things that resonate with me in this poem about that relationship between like a hardworking father and their, like when you're young, not being aware of those internal worlds and the struggles that they go through until later on in life. And just the very colorful language describing, because I feel like poetry is like the verbs are the blood of poetry. And I think your verbs are just like so gripping. But
I'd like to ask you a question. And it has nothing to do with that poem. You did this thing for Lackawanna, right? Last night. And you talked about the young people. We were having this conversation before the podcast started. I wanted to ask you, do you feel a full circle? Because you're going to meet up with them and you're going to give them a few notes, right? I think it's Bergenline production.
Yeah, Beeline.
When you were younger, you used to go to poetry sessions. I think you said you organized it in Havana Bay.
Yeah.
But there was obviously other people there before you that kind of like led you... Or was there like, hey, this is the art world, this is how we do things? Do you feel it's full circle that you're giving back to these young people?
In some way, but I think when I was coming up and when I like started that open mic, that was like the first event I ever produced with my friend Tom Van Cott. Mm-hmm. We're like just two degenerate kids who also made art. When we started it because there was nothing else, right? There was no poetry open mic that we knew of that was not like going to the New Eurekan or heading into the city. And we just straight up couldn't afford to keep doing it. And there was no like scene or community or group of people that we knew of that we could link up with and do this stuff. So we're like, why don't we just...
Do it yourselves.
Do it. Yeah, let's do it.
What have you learned throughout the years doing it, like DIY, as far as the art community?
I've learned, that obviously a lot of times I think we start doing these things for like selfish reasons. Like, right, I wanted a place to perform. Mm-hmm. And I wanted like I was writing a lot and so was Tom. And we wanted a place where we could go and read these new things in front of people because it felt very boring after a while to do it just for ourselves and to each other. And we started it for like very selfish reasons, but then very quickly it became about the other people that showed up. Once people started showing up and they started reading their work, we felt a responsibility to them to keep it going, and very quickly like matured in that way because we were not mature people, either of us. But it was that moment where like, hey, this is the third week and these same kids are coming back and they're all working on new things. Mm-hmm. And they're like getting to know each other and they're meeting up outside of here to work on stuff. And now this guy did a thing with this person. And so we saw like the community building and we were like, oh man, it's on us to keep it going now.
Once Havana Bay closed down, obviously now you see that you have this responsibility through this emerging community. How did you continue it?
We just moved. I moved. Think the way it works with like anybody, like friendships. There's like an ebb and flow, and so sometimes you're like around the person all the time, and then other times you don't see them all that often. So I think around the time that Havana Bay closed, I moved to Jersey City because I had been living in Union City, and I moved into this place called the Waterbug Hotel, which was like...
I've never heard of it.
That's not a great name.
Oh, wait, no, it's by the Holland Tunnel?
No, that's just the Holland Tunnel Motel, but it is also full of water bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Waterbug Hotel
Honest.
was an artist collective that was on the corner of Columbus and Barrow in that giant building next to the parking lot in downtown. And we occupied the top floor, the 4th floor. And our apartment was like a huge loft that we built out with a full stage and lighting and a DJ booth and a dance floor. And then these bedrooms that were sort of tucked away behind everything. Like my bedroom was the stage. When the stage wasn't being used as a stage, we had these like fake cloth walls that we would just like pull over, and that was my wall. And my bed was there. And so I moved in with them, and they had a small open mic that was happening at the Keyhole Bar in downtown,
Yeah,
like
still
in
there.
this, yeah, but it was in the like very illegal, unsafe space upstairs that had we eventually got shut down by the city because there's like no egress. There's no way to get out. If there's a
Wow.
fire, you're just gone now. You can jump out the window and fall a story. Or you just sit down and say your goodbyes. But so they shut us down eventually, but we had a speakeasy performance space up there. And we did that for years. We would just host these weekly open mic events and concerts in that space, and then in our apartment as well.
Did the cops come once the gentrification started or before?
No, once downtown started changing and like
That's a good question.
the neighborhood started changing and who was living in the neighborhood started changing, people reported us
Yeah.
Interesting.
for doing events in the space.
I know we were talking about it. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Right before how artists like go to an area because you were talking about it. Well, tell you what you said before.
I think the formula for gentrification following the arts, right, is a pretty common thing. What happens is an area is considered unsafe, undesirable, right? People with money don't want to live there, right? But that means that it is cheap rent. There might be more industrial spaces, commercial spaces that people are willing to rent to these artists without a lot of the rules. So you can live in this big, large space, and you can also create work there because you need room for your studio. So the artists move into these spaces for cheap rent and for space, and they create music, and they create art, and they create these like communities. And then people, all sorts of people, want to come interact with that art. They want to hear that music. They want to listen to these poems. So they come. But then a lot of the folks who have the money to like come consistently to buy the artwork are people with more money. So they come in and they're like, oh, wow, I love this. I want to be here too, but I don't want it to look like this when I live here. I want it to look nicer. So then they move into the neighborhood, but they're like, oh man, this is awful. I don't like this. The neighbors across the street play music. They barbecue outside on the sidewalk. Oh,
Like
this
what they
is
did
horrible.
to the Keyhole.
That's
Yeah.
so. I never made that connection. I never thought about it in terms of that sequence. But yeah, like they're attracted to the art, but then they smother the community in a way that the artists have to move out.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't know if they know they're doing it.
Yeah.
I think they think they're like beautifying or making the neighborhood better.
Yeah.
But they come in and they're like the very thing that made the neighborhood alive and beautiful, they want to strangle and kill. So they come in, they're like, my neighbor across the street listens to loud music, I want them gone. But then that energy is gone too.
Right.
The people sitting outside and like in the summer and like having conversations and like bringing chairs outside to spend time with their neighbors, that's gone because you
Right.
didn't want it there because it wasn't what you're used to when you moved from Nebraska to Jersey City. And now you want it gone. You need it gone so you can feel a little bit of your home in this place that is not yours, was not yours.
I like your neighborhood. I just don't want you in it.
Right. I want to
Right.
extract the beautiful thing that you do, that you produce, but I don't want any of the stuff that comes with it.
Yeah, but a lot of times I think then the artists go with it because the people get chased out, the rent goes up, new people move in, then the artists who originally these people were attracted to can't stay there.
Yeah.
Their studio spaces get shut down because now in this up and coming neighborhood, the city can't have these live workspaces that are zoned incorrectly. So they come in and they shut your space down. And then the $20,000 you sunk into your space is gone. you have no way to recoup that money. So now you're set so far back as an artist or an organizer or an event producer that you may never recover. You may never get back to a place where you have a space like that to create and to host events.
Jersey City just got named one of the most expensive cities in America, with the average rent being $5,000. Where do you think artists that are in Jersey City
Steep.
are? No, they did.
I didn't know that was the average, right?
Well,
Is that
look-
surprising to you?
Look at
5,000?
downtown.
No,
I mean, downtown-
because it's not surprising to me because the cafe I run is in a like luxury, apartment building, and some of the apartments in that building go for $3,000 to $4,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I just didn't
where
think
do
that
you
would be the average, though. That seems
Where do you
like-
think the artists are going now? Are they going to like Greenville? Are they going to Bergen Lafayette? Or are they leaving Hudson County?
I almost don't want to say because I feel like I'm drawing a treasure map for future gentrification.
want to know. I want to know the artists.
They're going to other places. A lot of them have just moved away, not like over a town, like moved out of New Jersey, have left. They're gone. And they're in other places that are more accommodating.
Interesting.
They're in New Mexico. They've gone to like pockets of like Alabama and places where they can afford a lot of space and make art. They can make art.
Interesting. Okay, I want to hop a little bit. So, like, you and I actually go back all the way back to high school.
Right. Yeah.
And in high school, I was telling someone today, like, I always thought Ben was going to be like a singer or an actor because you were doing a lot of singing back then. You have a beautiful singing voice. I don't know when you're using that these days. You like that? And then we did theater together. I was trying to remember. Were you were in The King and I, right?
I was in The King and I was the king.
Right.
But then I got kicked out
got
of The King
bumped,
and
that's
I,
right, 'cause I was like-
because I had gotten this is about money that you see, and this takes
Tell
us to
us.
money. You see, I was in The King and I, and
Is this a high school production?
I
or
was
like-
Anna.
was, yeah.
This was my senior year. Yeah, I was the lead.
And I was the king.
You were yeah.
But at the time, like my parents had asked me to get a job, right? They were like, you if you can you get a job because we're struggling with some stuff, and it would be good that if you had your own money. Not because they wanted me to contribute to the household, but because they wanted me to have things, and if I couldn't make the money to get it, they weren't going to be able to give it to me. So I got a job at a movie theater at a Lowe's in Secaucus.
Yeah, Low 6.
Yeah, and I had just started and I couldn't like pick and choose my schedule. And so they gave me a schedule that conflicted with the rehearsal dates. And when I told the teacher running the production, I was like, hey, I can't make these dates. I have to work. They were like, well, if you care about this production, then you'll be there.
I know
what do you-
exactly.
Yeah, what do you care
This
about
voice you're
more?
doing.
What's more important to you? And I was like, are you going to pay me to be here? Because if you're not going to pay me, I'm going to be at the movie theater. And he was like, don't come back next time.
That's
And I was
right.
like, okay. And I was not that kid. So if you were like, don't come back next time, you were never going to see me again. And so that's what happened. I just was like, okay.
You were such a good king, though, Ben.
Yeah, I was. I know.
Really.
Who ended up being the king?
This other guy,
Rudy. Yeah.
Yeah, he was good too, but it's not that because I'm in my brain. I'm like,
Yeah, he owns a
I feel like I
restaurant
did
now.
it with Ben, but
He
then I
owns a
feel like I
restaurant
did it
where?
with Rudy, and Rudy. It's because Rudy ended up being in it. Where's his restaurant?
His restaurant is here in Union City. It's called Uncle Chevere.
Uncle Chevy.
Where's that? Have you
It's
heard of
like
it?
down Bergen Line or something. I forget.
Oh,
But
What
yeah,
is
good
it?
for
What kind of
him.
food?
it's just like a bunch of, I don't know, all sorts of like Latin cuisine.
Latin.
Yeah.
Satine.
I don't agree with the Latinx
Latinx?
pronunciation. I think the other one works better for me.
What's Latinx?
That's the way I like to say Latinx because that's
Oh.
Latinx. It sounds nice, right?
No.
Okay.
No. I don't agree with that. I'm just like, you're Latino and that's it.
Well,
Latino for
Latin
life.
works fine, It just, you throw an E on the end, boom, we've solved the
Nice.
problem.
But it
Nice.
sounds like a white guy trying to say Latino or Latin.
Which one?
Latin.
Latin.
Then do Latinx.
Latinx.
That sounds so nice.
Latinx?
Latinx. You see? It bounces off the tongue.
So we were in high school together.
Yes.
That was fun, right?
Yeah. It came down to a money issue. It was like,
Yeah,
I need
wow.
to work because senior year was coming up. There was like graduation gowns that had to be purchased and prom tickets and all this stuff. And it was like, if I'm going to do this, I have to work this job. And this teacher was like completely not understanding that and was like, well, you have to commit to the theater. And I was like, bro, we're in high school. Like, what are you talking about? We rehearse in the gym.
Right.
Like, relax.
We don't even have an auditorium.
Yeah,
we're in an urban school. Yeah.
Those guys are lifting weights right there.
Were you writing poetry in high school? Because I don't ever recall that.
I had like a ton of stuff that I was writing, but there was not a place to share it. Like, it was much easier. Like, if I sang a song, I know where to do that. Right. And there's more opportunities for me to do that. If I sign up for these like productions and I act in these plays, there's a place for that to happen. But there was nobody like saying, hey, there's poetry open mics, or hey, look, there's this slam scene that's happening over here.
Were you writing poetry to make songs? Because I know when you're a teenager, everybody has a band, or were you writing poetry to write poetry?
I think I was doing both. I was like writing poems as poems. Because the thing is, like, my family was like super plugged in to the arts my whole life.
Okay.
So like my mentor, my brother's partner, my like nephew's dad was in the arts, right? This guy, Tom Worth, he was like just this amazing old white man, right?
RT.
Yeah. And he was just like an art lover, and he was like so plugged in. And so were my siblings. My siblings were some of like the first break dancers featured in like New York Times articles. My brothers all played instruments and were in bands. My father was an artist and a sculptor and a painter. So there was like all this art around all the time.
I'm sorry. Well, I'm still gonna ask. You can answer your question. Go ahead.
Well, no. So from early on, like at 10 years old, Tom was taking me and my nephew to La Mama to see experimental poetry theater.
Oh, wow.
Right? So
How old were you?
I was literally 10.
Wow.
Well, we went to stuff before that, but like I think that moment for sure, and I knew it instantly. In that moment, I talked to my nephew Robert about it, like after and since and recently. Like that was the moment watching this poet Abba Aletha do this like poetry opera where it was like his poems being acted out by actors with an opera singer on the side singing portions of the poem, and then Abba like sort of on this pedestal with a light on them, like reciting parts of the poem. Like that was the moment where I saw poetry and I was like, whoa, so poetry could be cool, you know? Because up until then, it was cool to me, right? Because I liked writing it and I liked reading it to some degree, but it never felt cool. Right, if like personally cool, like I enjoy this. I don't know about all of you, and I don't think, I didn't think it would be like a cool thing.
Yeah.
But in that moment, like watching this, like in this packed theater, this sold out show for poetry, and watching it be like sung over here by this dude and this actress like acting it out. Was this book Abba wrote called Song for My Sisters, and just watching the book being performed, I was like, oh wow, yeah, this is great. And so I started writing more poetry that was like I didn't have like a strong like base for what poetry should be, because a lot of the poetry that was being suggested to me was coming from like school and stuff. And I think I just thought it was kind of corny. But I did have like this obsession with the one person show and like monologue stuff.
Because we saw John Leguizamo and Freak. That was pretty epic.
Yeah, and all his shows before Freak, and then Danny Hawk and all their shows, and like so like I had that idea of what language could be, right? And then like watching Song for My Sisters, I was like, oh, so you could just write a poem and it could be anything. Like a poem could be anything. It doesn't have to be. Permission. Yeah. And so I started doing a lot of that, and I just had like notebooks full of, real garbage, because I was like a kid.
What were they like? What were your first poems like?
Oh, I don't even know. It was like me guessing at what hardship and life would be, because I definitely.
I'm sure you had some at that point.
I definitely had it, but I also think that like my personality and the way my family dealt with things, like things weren't great. We were like incredibly poor and things were really hard, but it never felt like that. And I just had like a lot of fun. Like I had a really fun childhood throughout all the like horrible things. Like if I explain it to someone else, they'd be like, oh, that's so terrible. Right? Oh my God. Oh, you saw people overdosing when you were young, and, there was all this like stuff happening in your neighborhood. But
You sound like me right now. I feel like you're doing an impression of me.
But if I explain it to someone, they're like, oh boy, I'm so sorry. But I'm like, you don't have to be sorry for me. Like,
Yeah.
It created you.
You
who
weren't
you are
aware of
today.
it. You didn't have
well,
context.
I was aware of it, but the context I had for it was like, this is life. You're gonna be okay. Like, I'm not a person that, and I think it's the way my family operates. We're not people that panic at things. We're not like scared of things. It's like, all right, this is a thing. It's not good. How do we operate around it and make it through?
Where's Tom now? Like,
Tom passed away a few years ago, so he's not with us anymore. He just exposed us to so much poetry and art. He was like really good friends with this like brilliant artist, Ben Jones, and all these like people. So we were like in all these homes of like poets and composers and dancers, like having brunch with them when we were little kids.
That's
and it
so
was
cool.
probably
That's really amazing.
it was probably not like we probably not should not have been there. Like I was telling the story to someone recently about like going to like this adult party in some like weird random little apartment on like the Lower East Side when we were kids that they took us to, and like people were drunk and hanging out, and it was just like me and my nephew were the only kids there, and you could tell like definitely some of the adults were like, why are these kids here?
Yeah.
But it was like he was taking care of us, and he wanted to go see his friends, and he was like, I trust my friends. Come on, you're coming.
Wow.
And you'll sit on the couch and you'll listen to these weird adult conversations about things you don't care about, and, eat hummus.
it sounds like he exposed you to a whole world.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
He opened
Yeah.
up the portal. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious. I mean, I know you're a poet, but you also do other things. But I'm curious to kind of get into that because you're a really incredible poet. And we're gonna put some like shots of you and some clips of you doing your poetry because like the way that you claim a space.
Right here.
Last summer in Puerto Rico, I took my shirt off at the beach for the first time in my adult life.
Woo!
I let my corpse-like whiteness meet the sun. And I built sand castles with my daughter and waded in the water, letting the reflected rays kiss my sagging chest like a love finally requited.
I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the way you claim a space. Like last night, because you weren't there, so they had a bunch of different poets.
Yeah, I was at dinner. I was wearing the same clothes.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
I changed my socks and underwear, so.
I'm proud of you.
Okay,
Anything
thank
else
you.
you'd like to share about your work? No, but there was an arrangement of poets, and they were all really good. I mean, they all had a very unique perspective. And then Ben came and was kind of like King Kong, just like, all right, I'm going to completely restructure the stage. I'm going to talk down to the people on the first floor. And like, just his manner and everything was so huge. And you're just like, this is what he was born to do. Like, this is a person living passionately and sharing their gift. And it's a gift that you've honed. But at the same time, I was telling my friends too, I'm like, low-key, Ben's always been like this. Like, I don't remember you doing poetry, performing poetry in high school, but like, you always spoke with this authority. You always had a big presence. You always could make people laugh on a dime. Like, that's always been a really amazing thing. Okay, this is kind of niche, but I'm remembering one time, do you remember when we were in history class and we had a teacher kind of shaped like a dinosaur from like the dinosaur show?
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about, history teacher? And she was going like, she never got up from her desk, but she came out from behind her desk and she was going like this, but her feet were moving just as slow. And you just leaned over to me and you're like, in her mind, she's running. That's like one of my favorite moments from being in class with you.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Oh my
that
goodness,
bit of my
dead.
cruelty.
Dead. But she was she was very mean. I mean,
yes,
this is not
yes,
even
yeah.
about her body.
No,
it's
yeah,
just that
yeah.
she was a very mean, cruel person. Anyway.
So it's okay to shame her if she's.
No, it's not okay. It's just a funny story. It's just what happened. Wow, Danny. I mean, well, it's funny because Ben did a poem about his body yesterday, and it was just the vulnerability, like how you confuse vulnerability and humor and deprecation and self-celebration. Like it's a really interesting cocktail. So I'm curious to ask you, what to you makes poetry good? Or what makes good poetry?
I think it really varies. Like it's not like I could write out a recipe. It's like sometimes, and I think it also really depends on like what I'm feeling and who I am that day, right? Like if I'm feeling very good or I'm in a very good place, maybe something will connect with me that won't resonate the same way if I'm like feeling really down. So I think that's like a huge factor in it for me.
Yeah.
But I think it's like a turn of phrase, and I want to use the word brutal, but I don't think that's accurate. It's like almost like a very natural but like eloquent turn of phrase gets me. And I think also, which sounds like whack and weird, and I hate when people say it, but I'm going to say it anyway, is like authenticity. Like when someone is speaking to me in their voice. And that doesn't mean that it sounds like how they speak. Right. Or it's the same like language patterns as if we're just having a conversation. But when like someone reads and I'm like, that is them. They're not trying to be this other person. They're not trying to emulate this other thing they heard before or something they know works. They're just doing their thing. Like there was the person yesterday, Mark, who read, and every time I hear this person, it's like, yes, Mark knows who they are, and Mark knows what they want to sound like when they get up there to read a poem.
It sounds like you're becoming somebody else's Tom. You're mentoring through your poetry a younger generation. And kind of like shifting a little bit the conversation. How do you balance being a creative poet, but still you have a family, right? You have your daughter, you have your bills. How do you balance that life within like, this is the community I built for myself and this is where I belong, but I also understand that I live in a world where money matters?
I think it's a constant shifting and restructuring, like can be 10 to 20 times within one day, right? Of like reprioritizing and figuring things out. Like, you know, I wanted to do the podcast today, right? And I knew that was the thing I wanted to do and it was important to me and I knew what time I had to be here. But we did the show yesterday. And during the show, at some point we're like loading in or loading out equipment, somebody pushed our front door the wrong way and broke the lock. So after I closed up last night, it was like 1:00 in the morning, I finished mopping, cleaning, everybody's gone, I reset the space. When I went to leave, the door was broken and could not be locked.
Oh my gosh.
So then I had to start calling locksmiths, tried to get a locksmith to come, waited for them, they never showed up. Now it's 3 in the morning, I'm still there, had to call the assistant manager and ask for their bike lock so that I could lock the doors together.
Smart.
So that I could leave. So I did that, found a way for the staff to get in today. And then the door broke further where the lock fell down. It's this weird mechanism in a way where the door was wide open, blowing cold air in. The staff is in there. They can't get the door closed. It's getting worse and worse. So I know I'm not a locksmith. I can't fix it, right? I can't fix the problem. So it's like I had to figure out a way to fix it enough where the door will close. At the end of the day, find a way for them to lock it. So we got like a bike chain combination lock that they're going to use, and everybody now on staff has the combination. So I can't fix it, but I have to find a way to get it done so that, sure, it's not perfect, it's not great, the problem's not resolved, but done enough so that I can get on to the next thing that is not business, that is not money making, that is important to me. And that's like the way it always is with making art. It's like, there's this thing I need to do to make money, right? And sometimes it's not your art. And most times it's not your art. Like most working artists I know have some other job. And even artists who are like, yeah, I'm just a writer, right? This is what I do. It's my one thing. No, you're not. You teach at a university. So it's not you're teaching writing, but you're a teacher.
Yeah.
So it's like very rare where it's like, this is the only thing I do.
Right.
So it's a constant figuring out like, how much of myself can I give to this in a way where I'm not going to feel like I am walking away, leaving this unfinished or unresolved, or I haven't given it what it deserves. But you have to treat everything with a sort of like level of importance.
Yeah.
So that is an example of like I had to take care of business, right? Of my job,
The practical world.
Yeah, and make sure the employees are safe and they're taken care of and they're not sitting there cold all day. I have to take care of that. Had a whole day planned with my partner that changed drastically because I now had to do this. How do I take care of them and make sure they don't feel neglected or deprioritized? And then how do I get here to honor my commitment that I've made? That's it. It's
like Tetris.
Yeah. So that's how you do it. You do it by honoring all the things, right? You have to like keep that in mind, that when you forget how important one part of it is, you can really hurt someone or hurt yourself or hurt your bottom line, right? So it's like finding a way to give everything the amount of respect and attention that it deserves.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you got paid for your art?
Yep.
What was it?
Oh, it's so weird. I had a book that was a like breakdown of all the classic monster movies. The Wolfman, Frankenstein, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Phantom of the Opera, right? And it like had sort of like a synopsis of every movie, a list of all the actors and their names, and then like photos of them, and then a bunch of photos from the movie of like the performers as like the Wolfman or Frankenstein. And it was drawing the portrait pages of those monsters and then selling them to my classmates for $1.
What grade were you in?
It's a lot of work.
I was in like 3rd or 4th grade.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that.
Good for you.
Okay, what was the next time?
The next time?
Or like further, like when you were an adult and you're like, okay, I'm an artist now. Like this is...
That's more specific because he was going to tell us about like 2 weeks later what he did at a milk carton.
No,
He's like, one day somebody gave me $1 to draw on a baseball card.
I got in trouble for it. No, I got in trouble.
Graffiti?
No, I got in trouble for selling those
That book?
pictures
Oh.
because one of the kids took the picture home to their parent and told their parent that they gave me $1 for it, and then their parent complained to my teacher, basically saying like, "Hey, this kid took my daughter's money." I'm like, "Bro, you paid for that."
Yeah.
So,
okay.
yeah.
Did you have to give the $1 back?
No, but
Good.
I had to not do it again.
Just another notch in the agony of artists with money.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? Forget it. I'm giving everything for free.
Yeah. The teacher was like, you can't be selling people things. You don't have their parents' permission. That's not their money. And I was like, all right, whatever, bro.
So then, okay, let's talk more about money. The purpose of this podcast is to inspire artists to know that it can look different. You know, we're not trying to say anyone needs to do anything. It's just like we want to interview different people and artists who are very much identify as artists and who have gotten creative about ways to make money with their art and supplementing with other jobs or whatever they need to do. Like, what are some ways that you have made art? You have made money on your craft.
I mean, obviously, I think the most successful money-making endeavor so far has been the installation, right? I made money from the ticket sales, made money from the sale of the art pieces, from the sale of the books, the sale of the merch attached to the installation. And it's the most money I've ever made from art. It is also the most work I've ever put into making art. Because everything from I had a sweatshirt with a poem on it that had an astronaut, right? So I created that design. I had to create that, like do the whole graphic design for that. And then I had a like bendy figure of an astronaut that was like a tie-in to that art piece that you could buy separately. You could buy this figure. But even that, it's like sourcing the figure, creating the label design, and then creating the design for the display that the figures were going into. So it's like so much layered work. So yes, it was a lot of money, but if you're like doing the equation, you're like, how much time did you spend doing this? Maybe I broke even.
Oh, wow.
You know what I'm saying? But obviously I'm not doing that because it was like I was doing this in between a lot of things. It's like whenever I had a moment to throw at this project, I would do it.
Thank you for tuning in to Art with a Lisp.
In this segment of Hole in the Wall, we get to visit a local hidden gem, iSpresso, where they specialize in medium roast coffee beans and have an assortment of Korean and American cuisine. One of the things I appreciate about them is they contribute a lot to a local art community by a resident artist each month and hosting a Thursday night poetry unfold along with a Monday night art class. One of my favorite things to drink is hot chocolate, which they make the best. This is the owner, Suki, making a fresh sandwich. Enjoy, and I hope you could visit and we can meet at iSpresso. Do you ever feel that, because I know when I was a kid, I was all like against money and like you're going to do something, you do it, and that's it. Like I don't know if that makes sense to you, but do you
That wasn't a full sentence. I don't know what you mean.
You know what I mean?
You know when you, right?
You got me. When you're part of the underground scene, I feel like there's a mentality
Like a Ninja Turtle.
Yeah, when you're a Ninja Turtle, there's like a mentality that you could only make so much money and like screw the man and all this. But what you're starting to sound like, and obviously you're an adult.
You're starting to sound like Splinter.
No, but you're starting to sound like that artist that was all about the creativity, and now you matured into this. I could still be creative and sell. So do you feel like maybe younger people might be like, oh, that's being a sellout, when all you're being is realistic?
I think for young people, the idea of sellout doesn't exist anymore.
Really?
Yeah. I think
They're more open to making money.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think that is a thing anymore because a lot of the icons that I think young people look up to are money making people who like have monetized their social media and have a doll for sale
And a makeup line.
You know, yeah. And so they're looking at examples of like people sometimes who are making art and sometimes who are just like celebrities, right, for just being alive. But I think a lot of like their examples of like artists who create meaningful art are also making money, and there's no shame attached to that anymore, right? So I think this younger generation understands that like in order for me to continue to make this art, I have to make enough money to live, right? And I think that even back in the day with like the way the punk scene worked and the way people looked at money there, it was a lie because the bigger punk bands made a ton of money, right? They just yelled on stage, "Fuck the man," you know, you know, like it was like this whole front. But meanwhile, like
they had more reach. Too.
You guys are going to the gym and you have expensive gym memberships and you have nice cars. You live in a nice house.
Yeah.
But then you're wearing a t-shirt and dirty jeans to get on stage to yell about the man. Like, so there was like this weird,
like Iggy Pop was like so down, but he has a lot of money.
I mean, Iggy Pop
jacked.
is, he's very rich.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he's the best example because I think Iggy Pop is Iggy Pop. You know, it's like
he's an
it's
icon,
like their own thing, you know, like they just did whatever they wanted and they never apologized for anything. So that was like part of their persona is like living their life unapologetically the way they want to. Right. And like and maturing in a lot of ways. Like they're a pretty brilliant artist all the way around. Right?
Yeah.
And the way they've like lived their life, the way they've turned their life around, the way they clean themselves up, the way they work and operate in the world now is like very different from when they began.
Yeah.
Like some crazy kid. Yeah, there was like that idea that existed in the scene back then was a falsehood, you know, even with like bands like Nirvana that didn't want to be mainstream. Like at some point that's not something you can control. You want to put your art in the world. If enough people like it, you don't control how you move in the world anymore.
Yeah, or what comes to you.
Yeah, the audience decided for you. And you can fight against that, but you hurt them, you hurt you.
Yeah.
You lessen your opportunities in this like weird masochistic fight to stay this thing you never were.
Wow.
Change is inevitable. You can't go out in the world and say, I want to share this stuff that I'm making and I want to share this art that I believe in and then not want it to get to all the people. Once it's out there, that's not your decision anymore. And so, yeah, I don't know. I know what you mean because I heard it so often, but I definitely think that doesn't exist in the mind of a lot of like young artists and creatives anymore. Like it's just gone. We live in a very different world. And I think even when it did exist, it was not real.
Yeah, that's a really insightful point. I never thought about it that way. I think you're right. I think there's like almost like a facade to it of like you want to seem like someone who doesn't need money and doesn't care about money, but then as it comes to you, you're not rejecting it. Like you're using it. Like as you've evolved as an artist, how has your relationship with money changed?
When I first started making art, there was no thought of money connected to it because it wasn't that to me, right? It wasn't a thing that I could do for work or that I thought people would pay for. And it also was like a thing I did because I had to do it. Like I needed to make this stuff and I needed to get in front of people and say it and show them, because if I didn't, I was going to be so sad and I was just going to feel so incomplete. So like I said, at first it was like a very selfish motivation that was like emotionally driven and there was like no intellect to it or no thought or planning. It was like, I need to make this stuff because it's in me and it's like almost bursting out and I don't know what to do with it and I don't know what to do with this feeling. So I have to get it out. And then now once it's out, it felt sad to be like the audience of one that you know, like I want to
Share it.
Yeah, I want to share it, but I also want to know, like, yeah, it was like a sense of like validation. And I think when I started making art in earnest, it was like in a very, very trying time in my life. Like I was 19 and my dad had just died, and that triggered like my mom's Alzheimer's. So it was like, he's gone, now she's gone too. Like she's here, but she's gone. So, and then I became the person who like had to take care of the household. So I went from being like this kid, right? High school's over. It's just over, right? And like, I'm in charge of everything now. And it was like, oh my God, I'm not ready for this. I can't do this. Yeah. But I had to do it. So the only place that was like mine where I could feel that freedom was in this art making and in this art sharing. So it became like necessary to be out there doing this for people, because otherwise I feel like I was not going to make it. So at first it was like incredibly selfish and incredibly like emotion driven. And then as time went on, like I said, I learned that this thing we were doing for ourselves was for them, for these people. And then knowing how important it was to me and how like life-saving it was in so many moments, it became incredibly important for us to keep it going for them, because we were, you know, like me and my friend Tom we were very irresponsible kids, right? And we were very wild kids. We really were. Yeah, right?
And great kids.
We were always people that loved other people. And we were always people that took care of other people. So when we saw this need and when we saw like what this meant to people, we realized that like things had just changed for us, and now we had this level of responsibility, and we stepped up to meet it. And I think that's when it started changing. But it wasn't for a long time that I felt like I could ask for money for my art in the way I wanted to, because I watched a lot of like my peers like move up and do a lot of the things I wanted to do, but they had opportunities and their lives were set up in ways that mine was not. They had 2 parents that they could live with and pay no rent to, and just take money and like tour the country with their poetry chapbook for 2 or 3 months because they have no bills. I didn't have that life. Yeah. So realistically, I could not do that. So I was never going to get to where they were at the time and in the way that they were doing it. And I come from a working class family. So like it seems so irresponsible to dip out on my family, on my roommates or whatever, and be like, oh, now you got to figure out who lives in that room. I'm out of here. I'm going to go run around the country and yell at people. So, that it seems so irresponsible. So I couldn't do that. So I had to do the art in a way where like I keep my job, I work a job, I make money to pay for my bills and the things I want to do. Then I make this art on the side, which meant realistically, I don't have the time to dedicate to this that this person does. So if you give them this opportunity of like being a teaching artist or teaching this class, like they're going to have a banging lesson plan and they're going to come in rested and refreshed and ready to teach this class. I am not. I just finished my other job. I did like all this other stuff and now I can do this. So I was always at like this disadvantage, and I was like, but I was realistic and I was aware of it. I've never had that feeling of like, there's this like thought of like, go for it and like go for your dreams. But I think a lot of that idea, like, cool, yes. Sometimes, yes, go for it. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of that idea comes from a wild place of privilege where like it's coming from people who have very, very few hurdles in front of them and like very few walls up. And so they're like, yeah, just go for your dreams. Just start the thing. And it's like, there are 4 safety nets beneath you that don't exist for me and never have, and they are never going to. Yeah. So I can't operate the way you operate.
Right. The Wipers have a line that says, youth of America struggling for survival, but there's no place to go. And I think I relate to you in some aspects because I think, especially when you're young and how Union City used to be, or whatever part of the nation you're from, you struggle through a lot of adversities that not a lot of other people come by. And at a young age, you don't know what to do. And sometimes people make the wrong choices. Sometimes people make good choices. Or sometimes they have somebody there to like guide them. I'm glad that art was there for you as a crush, for you to lean on. But how about when a younger person today is confronted with some of those adversities? What would be something like, again, you're Tom and they're you, they're Ben, so what would you tell them? Does that my question make sense? No.
I don't understand what you said.
Okay. I said a lot of words.
If what would my advice be to some, like a kid who is struggling with these? Yeah. If it's a kid that came from a similar like background or financial situation that I came from, I would say you really got to figure out how to create with what you have. Because you can sit there and you can look at what other people have and the materials they have access to, and you can feel bad about yourself that you can't recreate that, or you can make the thing you can make and make the best version of that. Because I think I spent a lot of time doing that, like looking at what other people were doing and being like, oh man, I can't do that. No, I couldn't do that, but I could do this, and I could do this really well. And then that informs this next opportunity, because now you know how to do this and you take that with you here and you create this new thing, right? Like, do what you can with what you have. And there's no shame in it. And there shouldn't be this fear attached to your art making. Like, it would be great if we could make money off of all the art that we created. But sometimes you're building towards something bigger. If I hadn't had all these like failures and like false starts, missed opportunities, like projects that were unable to come to fruition because I didn't have the means. If I didn't have those before, I wouldn't have been able to do the installation piece because everything went wrong with that. So if I had just stopped because everything was going wrong, it wouldn't have happened. But because I've been through all these things and known failure and known that I can survive it and that I'm not going to die because this didn't work or I failed at it, I could keep going and keep adjusting until I had something that was workable, that was good, that I could put in front of people and be proud of. Because the original idea for the installation was a dark room full of digital signs scrolling and flashing my poetry. You walk into a dark room, no light but the light coming from the signs. You walk up to the signs, you interact with the poems in that way. That is a $40,000 to $50,000 idea.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
When I started pricing it out. It's not going to happen. And I applied for grants that would have gotten me close to that, and I did not get them. But I got this $5,000 grant. So now how do I do this? And the way I did it was adjusting over and over again. I want to do a big digital sign. I don't have the money for that. I get 2 smaller ones. I make those work. I see what text will work in this format. This text is going to work as a Magic Eye puzzle. This can work as a hotline. If I create a hotline and people can call in, these pieces of text work better being heard. So those will be the pieces that go there. Oh, these pieces of text might work best if they're in print, but I don't necessarily want to have like a book or a print thing that people interact with. Oh, I'll do a text thing. So it was like shifting.
Yeah, that makes me wonder, does deprivation fuel creativity, or do you think, like, has there ever been a sense of like, if I make money, then, or if I make more money, then am I going to be less creative because I don't have to be scrappy and kind of, you know what I mean?
I think personally, like if I had the money, right? If I like had all the money, right? And I don't have to worry about it or where it's coming from, I would be just as or more creative because I don't have limitations and I can play. I can throw all of this text on digital signs and throw all of this text on some other medium and buy that thing and that thing and that thing. And if it doesn't work, I store it away or I give it away to someone. And then I'll play with this idea. And if that doesn't work, who cares? I'm not hurt by it. So if I had the means, I think I would be more creative or more willing to play with ideas. But I don't think I would get the same thing that I got from these limitations. Sometimes limitations are like really beautiful. They're like saying you can't go up here, right? And it's real. Like you get here and that's it. That's as high as you can go, right? But if you can, so you can't fly, right? You get here, you can't stay up here. You can't fly. But maybe down here you like dance and you're really good at dancing and it's really beautiful, right? Yeah, you know? So you're not going to fly, but maybe you're just dancing down there, right? And you figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Right? So
Is that what a limiting belief is?
Good question. I think I understand what you're saying. I think there's something to that. Like you would have created something different with more money. I think you would have enjoyed it. You enjoyed this, but it sounds like you also have like a very accepting and a nature of the limitations and what they did for you, like a gratitude for what those limitations provided for you. Is that?
I think so, yeah. I think I have learned the last few years to be very grateful for my life and for the opportunities I am presented with and for the things that I am able to create. And I think that, it's just so, it was so interesting to do it. I don't know. It's like, I know I was an active participant in this and like I made these things, right? I made this installation, but it feels very good coming from like where I was coming from. Like, you know, we have like discussed it. Like I've been clean for 5 years, right? I spent a lot of my life being like just an addict and like really being controlled by my addiction, right? And really limited by my addiction. And being presented with these problems that I can look back on myself from 6-7 years ago. If one of these things had gone wrong, I would have fallen apart in that time, in those moments, right? And like being presented with them over and over during this making of this one thing and being like, okay, we'll figure it out. And then figuring it out. And right. And not only figuring it out, but like during the course of this, I had to teach myself how to screen print. I had to program this call-in line. I had to figure out the text service. I had to create, shoot, and edit these video pieces. Then I had to figure out how to get them on this ancient box television, right? And thing after thing went wrong with each one of these projects. And I figured it out. and I
it came
did
out
it.
beautiful. Yeah.
Right. And so there is like a lot of limitation, but when you find a way to work within that limitation and to get the thing at the end, it feels so good. It's so satisfying. And like personally, I feel so full from that experience that, yeah, like I would love all the money to make my weird light up sign show. Right. But I really loved this experience so much that I would not trade one for the other.
Interesting. So what you were talking about before, I want to address that because I think you made a really good point about the idea of like this thing of, oh, go for your dreams, like being a part of a package of privilege. And like, it's, yeah, easy for you to say because you have all of these resources. I think there's also I agree with that. I think there's also an element of sometimes a limiting belief that sometimes our beliefs limit us from seeing the resources that we have. Sometimes go for your dreams, actually, the process of that, and this is something that I do with people in coaching, people who think I don't have options. And then we get into it and we realize it's actually a mindset block, that they're just not able to perceive the options yet, that there's a confidence, a lack of confidence that makes them think their world is very small, and that when you kind of unearth that, their world opens up and they start to see, oh, actually, if I did it this way, I might be able, you know what I mean? It's like a mindset shift. So it's not to diminish or to minimize people who don't have resources, but sometimes we have more resources than we think. And like you said, like create what you can with what you have, but also realize you may have more than you think. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And how just a mindset shift can start this cascade of abundance to come into your life. So maybe you didn't have it in that moment, but that doesn't mean that if you now go out into the world more confidently and you're speaking openly about what you do and you're making requests and you're asking for money, you're asking for donations. Oh, well, I mean, then you can get those safety nets. You know what I mean? What are your thoughts about that?
Courage.
It does.
To go up to someone and be like, this mason jar of water is worth X amount. I think it takes a lot of courage.
I think you could get at least $2,000 to $5,000.
I hope so.
Art Basel.
You want this back? You gotta pay out.
But to answer, I want to also go. I want to hear more from you about like your evolution as an artist and how your thoughts about money evolved as well. Because now you are not in that position anymore. Mm-hmm. And where are you at now with money and how you view it and your work and how does it affect your work, all of that?
I think I have I was taught a very valuable way of like seeing things, right? And the way that I got access to this way of thinking is not great, right? It's through like coming to terms with the fact that I was a drug addict and that I needed help, right? But then through NA and Narcotics Anonymous, right? There's a process, right? You go through these steps, right? And part of that process is you list all of the bad things about yourself, right? And you have to be honest. You have to be fearless in this inventory. Like you're really doing it, and your honesty has to be at the forefront because you have to list all these things. But then you have to list all the good things about yourself. And you have to be just as honest and fearless in doing that as you did with the bad list. Because that's easy. I think most people would have an easier time sitting there and listing all the bad things about themselves than if you gave them the same amount of time and ink to list all the good things about themselves.
Yeah.
2 questions.
Wait, hold on.
I'm sorry, but
I want to know where this is going.
Well, because of that, I see the value in what I do, and I am choosing not to ignore it or not to minimize it. Like I know what I do. I know the value in it. I know what it can do for other people. And I know that there is more value in me continuing to make art and sharing it with people than if I were to not do it or if I were to give it less, if I were to honor it less. There's value in what I do, and I recognize that, and I'm not ever going to go back to looking at it in this other way, right? So now it feels, it is easier for me to say, I need X amount of dollars to do this thing because I do.
Yeah.
And if you want it and you want it the proper way and you value me, then that's what you will give me. And it's not to say that there are not times where I will do something for less than I would like, but I would have to care about this group of people, this cause, this thing. It's like equal value, but it's not in money, right? So there has to be this other thing that is worth just as much to make me do it for less.
Yeah.
So-
So you measure that. It's not that you don't value yourself when you give something for free or for less. It's that you've made a negotiation there and there's value to you in giving it for that amount. So that's a really beautiful thing. And I'm so glad you said that.
My two question is, if someone's facing similar issues as far as with narcotics, where can they go?
I mean, I think first thing you can do is find out. You can go to like na.org, like NAS,
Nick, right here.
and look for a local meeting list. Because like, yes, you can go to a treatment center or any of those things, and those are like valid ways to get clean. But in going to like an NA meeting and going into these rooms, you are gaining access to people who have been through it and could offer you like a real guide to like, this is where I went. Me, the person in front of you who has 25 years clean and has built this new life for themselves. This is what worked for me. Right? So you're getting like real advice from people who have been exactly where you have been, right? And who have made it out. No matter what you're going through, community will be helpful, right? If you're in it.
Yeah, I think that's such a big, from my outsider perspective, like I see you as such a large figure in the community, not just the arts community, but it sounds like you've benefited so much from the community of NA, and that like you understand that we are part of like this big web, this bigger picture, and like you really fully embrace that role and become a resource to others. Because just as much as like people will promote you, like I've seen you promote other people constantly and other businesses and whatever project is going on. How does that community influence your art?
I think there's a lot of inspiration that comes from interacting with the community, because it keeps like ideas growing and changing, and the way I look at things, or I'm inspired by different people and the way they do things, or even how they carry themselves and the way they like treat other people or interact with folks. And like thing is, like community is very important to me. And within like my NA community, the arts community, just community in general, right? I am very aware that I have not always been the best influence or member of my community. And there were straight up times in my life where I was not good, and I was not a benefit to my community, and I was a hindrance to my community, and I was a destructive force within my community, right? And even in like NA, I'm not great at keeping up with people, right? This is a thing I talk about a lot within meetings, is that when I'm going through things, I have a very hard time like reaching out to people and asking for help, or letting them know that like, hey, I'm really not doing well, right? And I have to get better at it. But I still show up and I still talk about it with them, and little by little I'm growing, and I do the same within the arts community. Like I recognize where I have failed. And I own it, and I do everything I can. I treat it, both things, the same way. Where I have failed, I will try to do better. If I have wronged you, I will try to make amends. If I cannot make amends to you, I will make my life the amends, and I will live a better life, and I will grow and change so that I can be what I want to be, so that I can be within this community a thing of value, a thing that adds value to this community, because it gives me so much.
My second question, I'm sorry. My second question was, when you hit bottom, where was art?
It's interesting because I was doing very well in art, because the art community was very accepting of this train wreck version of myself, because I was the source of material for people, right? Like they could disapprove of my behavior, but they would go tell their friends my story. They wouldn't try to help me. They wouldn't ask me what was wrong, but they would feed off of my own self-destruction, right? And in the art world, like this idea of like the rock star, right? You destroy your hotel room, you like those people die. And a lot of them die of drugs. You know, I did this like weird project last summer where I was researching like all these like musicians who have died of drug overdoses. And then I created a Spotify playlist where I would add one of their songs to the playlist, and I couldn't repeat an artist. And I had like 8 hours of music.
Oh my God.
Right? Of all these people who have died. And it was like this reminder to me that if I'm not vigilant in keeping myself together and like and staying clean, others may not be for me, and it's not their job. But because of this world I live in, this arts world, bad behavior is accepted a lot of the times, and it's becoming less and less. Right now there are serious ramifications for your bad behavior, right? And they will affect you, and they will stop you from making your art, and that's good. Because there has to be something. There has to be some control. You can't just let people who are maladjusted and unwell run amok within these communities. You can't, because it's so damaging to so many other art makers. But at that time, nobody seemed to care. Like I say all the time when I'm in meetings, like I get jealous of people who talk about their interventions. Because I'm like, oh my God, you have people in your life that cared so much that they got together and they were like, hey, we love you. We don't want you to die. No one did that.
It's like the opposite of community.
Yeah, I had like a moment. I had, and this is where like the God of my understanding, like this was a moment where God did something for me. And I know it because in that moment, I was not in a place to do it for myself. I was not. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about myself. I was so distraught. So something did it for me, and it did not come from me. I know that it did not come from me. And it was like I was feeling so terrible. I was so sick. I was running out of opiates, right? So I was getting sick. I was like getting physically sick. I was sick. And I had like tried to go to my doctor and get more, and they were like, you exceeded the prescription. We can't give you more. You should think about going to pain management, which meant someone else would control the drugs. And then in that moment, I realized like, oh my God, I'll have to go buy heroin now because they're gonna limit my pills. And it was that moment of like, oh no, look where we got. And I knew it. Like if they were going to take my pills away, that I was going to have to do it because I was sick. I was like throwing up. I was so hard. It was so bad. So I like went home and like, I don't know, was thinking about it, not like thinking about it. Like I'll have to do it. And sort of planning out who do I talk to? Who do I know that might know where to get it? Whatever, like planning it out, which is insane.
It's scary.
Yeah, it's insane. But that's where I was because I was hurting so bad. And that's the thing with like drug addiction. You don't continue to use the drugs because it feels great, because you get to a point where it does not feel good. It feels horrible and it makes you feel so bad about yourself. But if you stop, you feel worse. And I got to that place and I like went to my apartment, and it was like summer and it was hot and there was no air conditioning. I was like so sick and it just felt so bad in there. And I was like, thinking about this, like, how do I make this happen now? I'm going to have to start doing this. And I was like, no, that can't be my life. Like, that can't be my life. So I like made this awful decision to throw my pills away and flush them down the toilet. And then was like, oh God, what did I do? Started like really freaking out because I knew now I was screwed. I was so screwed.
Wow.
And I like tried for like 2 days. There's like this thing that was happening to my body where like this weird electric impulses were like in my legs. And I kept like, they were like twisting my legs and my arms up. And I was like in my room, like so sick. And I have to get up. I have to leave. I have to do something. I don't feel good. So I like walked out. I like walked to Persian Field, and I was like sitting in Persian Field, and it was like really hot. And I threw up in front of everybody. And they were like looking at me, and it made me feel like, I don't know, one of the worst moments of my life, like of embarrassment, of shame. And I was like, I have to do something. And I remembered from the past of like other incidents and like like a, suicide attempt, because when you're in addiction, sometimes you just want it to be over. And so I had tried many times to end it. And so I remembered that there's a crisis center by Persian Field. And I was like, oh, I will just go to the crisis center. And so I went, and they were like, oh, yeah, like, this is what we do. And so they like sat me down. I was like a mess. They did my intake. They were like, all right, this is where you're going to go. Do you feel like you need to go to the hospital? And I didn't want to do that because I, from the suicide attempt, knew what it was like to be in one of those psych wards. And I was like, oh no, I can't do that. I'll do whatever else you want me to do, but I can't do that.
Yeah.
So they agreed to give me a referral for this place that I went to, and it was like an outpatient like detox thing that I went to like 3 times a week, and then I did that. But that's at that time, even though obviously you hear that story, it's horrible, right? That person's life, it's a horrible life, but I was doing fine in the art world because I was getting very high to show up for a show, and I would do a great performance. I was high out of my mind. I felt great. Like all the endorphins everything was popping off in my brain. It couldn't have been better in that moment, right? But it was always going to crash. And then the times where I wasn't in front of an audience were the worst times. And that's how I was like rationing it for a while, is like, if I was going to be in front of people performing, that was when I would like really use, so that you would get this like, floaty, euphoric version of me that really loves you, and everything you say is so important to me, and then I would never remember it. So yeah, like this absolute fraud, right? That was showing up over and over. But I was an effective performer, and I put on a beautiful show. So people loved me, but I hated
like John Bonet?
myself. Yes. Oh God.
Dating ourselves now.
Do people love you, or they love that facade that you created?
The entertainment.
Very obviously the facade. And there are videos that exist on YouTube of me during that time. Absolutely.
Can we look for it?
You can.
Are we gonna link
Absolutely gone on drugs.
Oh, man.
And like I will look at the videos and there's none of myself in them, right? Like I look at it and I'm like,
Who was that?
I wasn't there. And like I don't have memories of it. Like they don't exist, right?
They're gone.
Like I'm looking at the video of myself, but I cannot remember being in that room. I can't remember faces.
For me to understand.
It would be so hard for me to explain to you in a way that you could understand, and I just would hate for you to understand.
Yeah.
I hope you never understand.
I'm so happy that you got through that and that you're still working through that and doing what you need to maintain like your sobriety. I think that's beautiful.
I'm glad that you're part of the art world, that you found a positive outlet. Because like when you have an addiction, you need a positive addiction. And if creating a positive community behind art and creating, and when we were talking before the podcast, it does seem like you're giving back to the community. I'm glad you have that, and you're sober. And you said you were 5 years sober. It's definitely not
clean,
easy.
Clean.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
That's the
Please.
other fellowship,
What's
AA is the sober.
Thank you.
NA is clean.
Thank you for
Clean.
correcting
I'm
us.
sorry.
Appreciate that. We're so out of the loop on that.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I'm glad you're 5 years clean and that you're able to contribute back to the community.
Yeah, amazing. And your art is, I feel like, better than ever. Ben, we could talk to you forever.
Yeah, definitely interesting.
So much to say, such a a wealth of information. I have one last selfish question. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that has been coming up for me lately is, going to these poetry open mics and stuff, and it's actually been inspiring me to kind of like dip my little toe and like some lines have been coming up to me and some concepts. What advice would you offer or encouragement to somebody? Because I'm also talking to other people who are saying the same thing, like, oh, I've never performed in front of people, or I haven't written poetry in so long. Like, what would you recommend as a suggestion for somebody wanting to start writing poetry and performing? Like, what are some of the anything you have to share about that.
I would say to not be afraid to share like your whack work, right? Like all poems start somewhere. And I think, and this is a thing that I practice. It's not like just a thing I say. Like I go to open mics and stuff and I read new stuff that I am unsure of, because I think it is important for the people in the room to not only see your practiced, polished work. Because if there's somebody in the room who's sitting there and is unsure about their poem and they're nervous and this is their first time, sometimes it does not help them for you to come out and be like, boom, yeah, look, and this is my choreographed movement to my poem, right? It is awful for them because then they have to follow that. Or the energy is too big for them and they can't live in that space. So it's important for you to go in and read your new work when it's weird and you're unsure and it's incomplete, because that is the real thing. And then you can come back and read the better piece later and people will have some context maybe, And like that is important. And if you are the person who is just starting out and you have this stuff that you're unsure of, there's 10 other people in the room just like you. They're not going to say that to you because people are insecure and we want to seem like we're really doing great.
Yeah.
But there's 10 other people there that are feeling the same thing. So read it, share it, shake. Like let your paper shake.
I like that.
Like you're gonna be okay. And you, at the end of it, when you finish and you didn't die and you didn't disappear and the world didn't end, you will realize that you can do this and that it's gonna be okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. So something I'm taking away from this conversation is that you have overcome so much. It has informed your work. It has informed your sense of community. You kind of like live to tell, because of what you've been through, and that your relationship with money has changed, and that as you have embraced the value of your work and the value of yourself and your life and your health, that it sounds like it has emboldened you to feel more comfortable about money and realize that money is like a tool of an artist. It's another paint color or something that can help you to achieve that vision. Did I capture, is that, am I getting that accurately?
So too. Yeah. And I also want to say, I don't want folks to always think that art making has to be connected to money, because just how people play in a recreational soccer league because they love soccer, they're not going to play soccer professionally. No one's paying them to play soccer, but they love it and it adds value to your life. If you want to create art because it adds value to your life, but it's not a thing you want to make money off of, or that's not the avenue, that is valid too, and do that as well,
Yeah, no, that's a great message. I love that.
I'm very grateful for your time, because you're a wordsmith, and the way you narrated your life with us, it's definitely an eye-opener into a different lifestyle. And I hope a lot of people get something out of what you said, because you had a wealth of information. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you out in the community.
Yeah, I look forward to being out in the community, and looking forward to your hole in the wall.
Yes, my hole in the wall segment.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a segment called Pay It Forward, where we just want you to give a shout out to somebody who you think is an incredible artist in the community that would make a great guest, who maybe have something to say about a paid artist or who has been paid at some point that you think we should reach out to.
There is a poet, Aurelia Luciano, who goes by Golden Light Poetry. Since they have started producing events and being part of the community, they give so generously of themselves. And this is a person who is a single mom who works a 9-to-5 and still finds time to do all these events that are very much about the community. They are not at the center of these things. This is everything I've ever seen them create is really to give people a platform and space to share their work in a way that is very special. This is a person that deserves it.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll check her out. Check them out.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Well, the people.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one. I'm the owner of Press Play Coaching. I've been spending over 20 years helping to empower women, inquiring of people, asking them questions, looking to understand myself and to understand them. I love hearing their stories. I love knowing what makes them them. Coaching allows me to help them to create a transformation in their lives that will open up the life of their dreams. The concept is that when you push the play button, the music begins to flow. And I want to help people get unstuck, take their life off pause, and be able to move forward confidently to the life of their dreams. All of these are things I've loved doing because I really love people and I believe in them. And I believe that a lot of people have a tremendous potential that they are not yet tapping into. As a mindset coach, what I do is help people to recognize deep-seated beliefs and patterns of thinking that may be limiting them and holding them back from living the life of their dreams. A therapist helps a person who's in crisis, who is in mental distress because of their mental health condition, and they take them from crisis to baseline. Baseline being where they are able to operate in everyday life, maybe they can keep a job, they have a family, but a coach takes them now from baseline to thriving. So we are doing more than just surviving. We are doing more than just living. We are thriving. We are living the life of our dreams. We feel great. Not that our life is perfect, because nobody's life will ever be perfect, but we are able to move confidently through our daily interactions, to really show up for ourselves, to claim space at work, to be able to advocate for ourselves, maybe asking for a raise, or maybe changing our jobs entirely to do something that we really would love to do more of, or starting a business. It could affect how we show up in our relationships, turning our insecurities and becoming vulnerable and being able to transform that into personal power. I love working specifically with artists and empaths and highly sensitive people. As a creative person and a person who is highly sensitive, I have struggled with depression and anxiety, and I've done a ton of work on myself and continue to maintain a level of happiness and joy throughout my daily life, and that's what I love to help my clients with. If you're an artist or an empath, do you find that you are overwhelmed a lot? Do you wish that you could be creative all the time? Do you wish that you could get paid for your creativity? That's the kind of stuff that we can work on. These are the challenges that we can address in a series of coaching sessions to help you to transform your life and to live the life of your dreams. I live in Jersey City, New Jersey, so I am available for sessions with locals in person in New Jersey, New York City, tri-state area. I'm also available for Zoom sessions and telephone sessions, whichever is more comfortable for you. If you'd like to work with me, if you're a person who is self-aware and ready to do the work, feel free to contact me at pressplaycoaching.net or on Instagram at pressplaycoaching. I would love to hear from you. So get ready to press play on your life.